Coming at you from the south side of Chicago, straight out of my mother's basement at my childhood home, I'd like to welcome you all to The Power to Persist. Hi, I'm Lamell McMorris, and you're now joining the Power to Persist podcast. I never set out as a kid growing up. I didn't necessarily think that I would become an entrepreneur. I actually thought that I was going to be the mayor of Chicago or, involved in politics as an elected official and public servant, or perhaps even, leading a national organization. My trajectory had been that, having worked for, national civil rights organizations and with national civil and human rights leaders and working in and around politics just from that vantage point. It was at a point at 27 years old when I was fired as a young executive director of an organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that Dr. King founded at the height of the civil rights movement. I was there, appointed executive director by Martin Luther King III, Dr. King's oldest son and namesake. While I was there, I thought it was clear as a, executive director of that organization and chief operating officer, I thought I was fulfilling, my path. But when that opportunity and that door closed, I had to figure out that perhaps, what I thought was my career trajectory would look a little different. And then it wasn't so much that it looked different, but I could perhaps marry that which I thought I was called to do with an entrepreneurial endeavor. And so going to Washington, D.C. in 2002 and launching a lobbying firm from the ground up, again, in the spirit of advocacy and in the spirit of, you can make money and do good at the same time. I went to Washington, D.C. and launched Perennial Strategy Group. Crazy thought at the time to think that out of the 40,000 plus registered lobbyists that I could just show up in Washington and start a firm. I think what gave me the confidence and strength to do that was, while I may not have been an attorney or worked on a congressional office or worked on a congressional committee or in one of the executive offices or the White House, I still had spent a journey navigating and engaging public policy just from a social justice vantage point. That gave me know-how around how to navigate capitals, Washington, D.C., and others around the country, relationships that I could leverage. And I didn't think it was unusual to go to Washington, D.C., and having grown up in Chicago, watching so many entrepreneurs as a kid, while I never necessarily endeavored to be one, I grew up in the shadows of Johnson Publishing Company, of Johnson Products, of Black-owned car dealerships, of Black-owned publishing entities and makeup entities and businessmen and women on the south side of Chicago here where I grew up. So it wasn't unusual for me to see Black people, women and men, as entrepreneurs. And, I guess instinctively, that gave me the gumption, if you will. And so in 2002, I arrived in Washington, D.C., in that sea of lobbyists in a, probably a Republican-controlled White House and Congress, not necessarily, having a bunch of relationships in the leadership of the time, but the confidence and ability to know that I can make it happen. Circumstances would have it. You leverage relationships. I talk about the power of your network in The Power to Persist. One of the 8 habits that I lift up on the path to resilience is a strong network and building strong relationships. And because of that, circumstances were in place, opportunity led to opportunity, and that's how I started my firm. I thought, frankly, if I were to be candid, being, fairly young and Black at the time, I think definitely differentiated me in Washington, D.C. I thought that would be an advantage. There weren't a lot of folks that had a standalone lobbying firm that looked like me, and surely in my age group. Matter of fact, the only African-American led quote unquote lobbying firms. At the time when I started, there were maybe only 2 or 3 of us in Washington, D.C. Thank God there are, 2, 3, 4 times that now, which is great to see. But, there were those who were there before me, and, we're still in business, and we're still able to continue to navigate to this day. My firm started off as Perennial Strategy Group. And I named it Perennial because that means lasting throughout the years. And, I went to Washington, D.C. I thought a city that was big on monuments and, memorials that have been around for years, and everything about Washington, D.C. speaks longevity. And so no one knew who I was. So naming my firm McMorris and Associates wouldn't make a difference. But I did want a message that I was going to be here and that we would be lasting for a long time. So I named the firm Perennial. And that was appropriate at the start and for a duration. Maybe the aspiration was to build, a big firm and, to have sustained growth and profits. Now I feel like I'm in the second phase. And so I renamed the firm Phase 2 because I think there's a point in our journeys and in our lives where we're working towards success. And now I'm working more towards significance. So this is the second phase of my journey and the second phase of the iteration of our work in Washington, D.C., and thus the name Phase 2. I try to look at every crisis, be it a pandemic or the murder of an innocent and unarmed individual by those who have been sworn to serve and protect. I try to look at any tragedy as an opportunity to serve, as an opportunity to build, as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to bring people who otherwise would not come together to get together, as an opportunity to bring various corporate and community interests together, as an opportunity to give especially clients and those Fortune 500 corporations an opportunity to see issues that confront us in society anew and afresh, and put together strategies to engage communities and to be a bridge builder. So, yeah, I don't negate, being deeply impacted by both events, the pandemic and the implications to the communities that I serve, to families and friends that I love. And, I can't tell you what it's like as a Black man in America to see images of Black women and brown men being killed in an unjust way. But, Reverend Jackson told me a long time ago, we don't get bitter, we get better. And I've tried to, harness those feelings and into positive strategies to make an impact and to make a difference. I talk about this in the book, losing a job, losing a business deal, losing a business partner. Those are the things in life that kind of knock us down, and they're kind of inevitable. In life, we're going to be knocked down. The challenge and thus the opportunity is, you get knocked down, but it's on you to get back up. And so, attitude comes into play in a major way because that mental fortitude can dictate how you get back up. And then, I think about, when you get back up, you have to be a little agile. You have to reinvent. You have to pivot at times. And that happens in business and in life. And then, one of the other habits I talk about is vulnerability. Is probably, and I've talked about this before, probably one of the most difficult to admit to friends, family, business associates. Hey, I'm down right now. I could use a lift. Hey, I'm hurting right now. I could use a push. Hey, things probably didn't quite work out the way I thought. Do you think you can lend a hand? it's this dynamic of projecting to the marketplace and to the world and to family and to friends that I've got it all together. It's duality, but at the same time, putting forth and making yourself open to admit that, I'm going through some stuff. I'm going through some changes. I'm having some challenges, and I actually could use a hand. I've had those occasions. They've not been easy. I don't, submit this to anyone listening with the thought that, it's easy, because, vulnerability means just that. When you're vulnerable, people can perhaps take advantage of you. When you're vulnerable, people perceive you at your weakest times. But those are the opportunities for you to demonstrate the best strength. Those are the opportunities for you to demonstrate the best of your network and the people that are around you. Those are the opportunities for you to shift your attitude and your mindset to a place that you've never gone to before. And so I see all of these, habits that we put forth and the need to be resilient as probably one of our greatest opportunities of our time. I think the first thing, I would tell a young person, a young entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, or even, young people in, high school and college, like, look, you may not see the line, especially when you're young. But as I sit here with you, especially in the basement of my childhood home here on the south side of Chicago, believe it or not, the line may not necessarily be straight, but there's a line from my childhood living here to everything I'm doing today. I always saw myself engaged. Maybe I didn't know how it was going to manifest itself, but I always saw myself engaged in, public policy and dealing with policymakers and change makers. Listen, have I had to go over here, sometimes, and did I get pulled there, or did I go over here, or did I go down here? But there is a line. There is a through line that we'll find in our lives from the things that we were attracted to, the things that pulled on us, the things that nudged on us, and it may not always manifest itself and play out the way we thought. But yeah, there is a line, and I would just, admonish people to pay attention to the line. Find the line. Perhaps that's the title of my next book, Find Your Line, because we all have one. You can reach me on Instagram at Lamell MC, Facebook as well as LamellMcMorris.com and phase2consulting.com. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening so you stay in the know about future episodes. See you next time, my friends.